So imagine this, right? You're a C-level executive working for one of Europe's top cybersecurity companies. You've been in security for years, you know the tricks, you've trained your employees on phishing, you've seen the playbook, you probably even wrote the playbook for your company. And one morning you get an email from JP Morgan Chase. It looks legitimate. It passes through your email security filters. The link inside goes to Cisco's website, a real Cisco domain, and one that Cisco actually uses for themselves. So you click it.
The problem is, you just walked into a 7-stage trap that group of threat actors spent a lot of time and money building
Specifically for someone like you. That's the story that we're going to cover here today on RepSec Wednesday. I'm Danny Rodriguez from VisioneerIT Security, and on this show, we cover stories that matter to everyone within the reputational security space, digital executive protection, personal security, and if you just have a large digital footprint that you want to secure. So we take these stories and we break them down so that you know how to protect yourself in the threat landscape today. Let's get into it. The company at the center of this story is Outpost 24, and specifically its subsidiary, SpecOps Software. So they're a European cybersecurity firm that runs threat intelligence, vulnerability management, and security research for other organizations. So this is not a mid-market company that just didn't have its guard up. This is the guard for a lot of companies. Threat Actor Group used a phishing as a service kit called Kratos and targeted one Outpost 24 C-level executives. Now, before I walk through the 7 stages, I want you to understand why this story matters beyond just these technical details I'm about to give you, right? Because we talk a lot about executive reputation and digital protection. We talk about data exposure, deepfake risks, credential compromises, but we don't always talk about that the best funded, most sophisticated threat actors don't spray and pray when using these kits. They like to aim. So when threat actors go through the trouble of doing this whole entire 7-stage pronged attack with infrastructure laundering, CAPTCHA gates, picture perfect credential harvesting pages, they are targeting one specific person, one high value person. And in 2026, that person is you, the executive, the founder, the C-suite leader, the CEO, not your intern, not your IT department's generic inbox. It's about you. So let's talk about how they built this trap and how it was stopped. So the weapon that was used, like what we already mentioned, was Kratos, and it's a phishing as a service kit. So what is this exactly? It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. So it's the commoditization of a phishing infrastructure. So someone built this phishing toolkit and is now renting it out the way that you rent out any other software. So that means that the group that targeted this executive didn't have to build all this from scratch. They just needed to rent it for a little while as they commit this attack. So they subscribed to the service, pointed it at the target, and let its pre-engineered system do most of that heavy lifting. And that's important to understand because it raises the floor. Because we used to be able to say that only state actors can pull off attacks this sophisticated, and that's just no longer true. And when we talk about state actors, we mean countries with unlimited budgets and unlimited resources, right? And Kratos, used by a well-resourced criminal group, can really execute these multi-stage infrastructure laundering phishing chains, right? Without building any of its underlying technology themselves. They just need to rent it out. And it really makes that difference between needing to know how to build the car engine versus just getting a driver's license and a credit card. So we have a couple examples below on the slide deck that show the capabilities of Kratos itself. So we see that each stage borrowed trust from real infrastructure such as Amazon SES, Cisco, and Cloudflare. And even with Cloudflare, their CAPTCHA blocks security scanners from ever seeing the payload. So that's how dangerous these phishing as a service kits are getting today. So now that we understand that, let's walk through the 7 stages. So let's start with that first stage, which is the lure. So the executive receives an email from JP Morgan with JP Morgan branding, right? And the subject line is something along the lines of, please review this document. And this lure is great because a lot of the time, C-level executives are dealing with these types of transactions all the time, and they're probably even fatigued out. And they chose JP Morgan Chase because it's widely used throughout the industry. So here's what makes it work technically.
from a technical perspective, right? And that's the email carries a valid DKIM and DMARC signatures via Amazon SES or Amazon's simple email service. So for those of you who aren't too deep in the weeds of email security, that's fine. So DKIM and DMARC are authentication protocols. So when an email passes both, your mail filters say, this is legitimate, not a spoof. I want to let it go into your inbox. And that's how Gmail and Outlook decide whether to route something to your inbox versus to your spam folder. So this email passed both checks. It looked clean, smelled clean, because technically for the purpose of authentication, it was. And this is the first layer of what security researchers are calling trust laundering. On to stage 2, which is the Cisco redirect. So the link to the email doesn't go to a suspicious domain. It actually goes to a secure web.cisco.com domain. So let's be clear about what this is. This is actually a real Cisco domain. So Cisco uses a URL rewriting service as part of their own email security tools. So when they themselves send links and emails, they route them through secure web.cisco.com to scan them in real time to make sure they don't have anything malicious. So the attackers figured out how to abuse that service to route their malicious link through it. So from an email security perspective, you clicked on a link to Cisco itself, a legitimate, globally trusted tech company. And that's the first hop, legitimacy borrowed. On to stage 3, the Nihilus redirect. So from Cisco, the chain hops to the Nihilus API platform. And Nihilus is a legitimate email and calendar API used by real developers to build real applications. And it's very trusted and whitelisted by most security tools. So that's the second hop, which is another layer of reputation washing. They're using Cisco and they're using Nihilus to trick your email security into thinking that this is a trusted link. So at this point, if that automated security scanner is trying to follow the link to evaluate it, it has now gone through 2 trusted high reputation domains. Most security scanners stop here and the chain looks clean. Now we have stage 4, which is the compromised asset. So the chain now lands on a subdomain belonging to a legitimate Indian software firm. The company had nothing to do with this attack, but their infrastructure was compromised prior to this attack and used as a staging point for a malicious redirect script. So this is a very common tactic used by a lot of threat actors. And what they do is rather than registering a suspicious new domain that gets flagged immediately by most security scanners, they use someone else's existing trusted real estate to trick security scanners into thinking that they're legitimate. So this is the third hop, which is borrowing someone else's house. Now on to stage 5, which is the repurposed domain. This is the next redirect, a domain originally registered in 2017, allowed to lapse, and then quietly reacquired specifically for this campaign. So why does a 7-year-old domain matter? And it's because domain age is one of the signals that security tools actually use to assess the risk of a domain, whether it's malicious or not. So a brand new domain raises a lot of flags. Who is this person? I've never seen them before. They have no history. But a domain with a 7-year history looks like it's been around the block. It's trustworthy. It hasn't been flagged. It hasn't been taken down. So even with it sitting dormant for most of that time, this kind of operational detail tells you that these attackers were playing chess, not checkers, because they know exactly what these security tools are looking for. On to stage 6, which is the gatekeeper or the Cloudflare human validation check. So this is where it gets particularly clever for whoever designed Kratos. So before the victim reaches the final phishing page, the chain runs them through a Cloudflare CAPTCHA or a human validation check that you've probably seen at most secure sites that you visited. And why does it do this? So automated security scanners, or the bots that organizations use to follow suspicious links and check where they lead, will fail that human validation challenge. So only a real human can get past it. What the attackers built is a gate that only real victims can get through. So automated security tools trying to assess the link see a CAPTCHA challenge and they can't complete it. And they report back destination unclear or inaccessible, right? So the link doesn't get flagged. The payload stays hidden from defenders. And this stage is worth dwelling on for a moment because it represents a deliberate countermeasure against automated threat detection. So the attackers anticipated how organizations would try to defend themselves and built a bypass directly into the kill chain. Now, onto our last stage, stage 7, which is the payload or that fake Microsoft 365 login page. So, this is the final destination where the victim needs to go for the attackers to complete their attack, which is a picture perfect Microsoft 365 login page equipped with its own fake loading animation designed to mimic the real one that is used. So, this occupies the victim's attention for a few seconds, long enough for it to feel normal and feel like the expected behavior of a real login loading page. And this is a performance, it's a theater, it's very clever, in all honesty, and very deceiving. And the goal is simple. It's to get the executive to enter in their Microsoft credentials. And from there, the attackers have access to their email, their files, their calendar, their contacts, and the entire Microsoft 365 estate. So I know what you're thinking. Did this succeed or did it fail? Well, good news is the attack failed. But it didn't fail because executives spotted it in time or spotted a typo. It didn't fail because they recognized the Cisco redirect as suspicious. It didn't fail because of security awareness training. It failed because Spec Ops, the threat intelligence arm of Outpost 24, caught the pattern in the infrastructure before the final stage could be executed. Their researchers were able to identify the campaign not from the email itself, but by monitoring that underlying infrastructure from the email. So the redirect chain that we discussed, the compromised subdomain, the re-registered domain, the Cloudflare configuration, they mapped the entire kill chain and stopped it from the outside before those credentials had the opportunity to be harvested. And that's what we call active defense. And that's threat intelligence operating exactly the way it's supposed to operate. And this is the point that I want every executive watching this to internalize. So what I need executives to really understand is that security awareness training is absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient with a lot of the attacks that we're seeing today. So even trained, paranoid security professionals like myself, someone who literally gets paid to be suspicious and to know what they're doing, might click a link that routes to Cisco's own infrastructure and passes through DKIM authentication and go through all these stages. And we wouldn't know the difference. And the attack like this was engineered precisely for people that know what they're doing. And the defense that works isn't to be smarter than the performance that's displayed through this 7-stage attack. It's to have the infrastructure that catches patterns before they reach you. That's the difference between passive awareness and active protection. They both go hand in hand when protecting your organizations, protecting yourself, and protecting your employees. And that gap is exactly what VisioneerIT exists to close for executives and organizations who can't afford to learn this lesson the hard way. So before I close out today's episode, let's go over a few takeaways that I want my executives, influencers, brands, and just regular people that deal with phishing scams all the time to understand before we leave. So number one is to stop trusting domains and start trusting context. So if a link routes through Cisco, Microsoft, or any other trusted domain, that tells you nothing about where it ultimately leads now. So threat actors are specifically engineering these changes to borrow the reputation of trusted infrastructure. So the question is not, is this domain legitimate? The question is, why is the link asking me to do this in the first place? So treat every review document request as a high risk event, full stop. Number two, DKIM and DMARC authentication is not a green light. So sophisticated attackers have already figured out how to pass those security tool checks. Passing authentication means that the email wasn't spoof, but it says nothing about whether the content itself is malicious. Number three, which is your protection built for someone who is the target? So your personal attack surface is the target that attackers are now focusing on. This wasn't a massive phishing campaign. This is a targeted attack on a specific executive at a specific firm. The attackers did reconnaissance. They chose their target deliberately. They built infrastructure specifically for this operation. And now they're actually able to rent it out, like in this situation right now. And if you're a C-level leader at a company of any significance, you are the high value target. Your credentials, your identity, your ability to authorize transactions or communications on behalf of your organization. The question isn't whether someone might target you, it's when they're going to target you, and are you prepared with a protection program that is built specifically for someone like you? So that's RepSec Wednesday, episode 5. If this is the kind of story that makes you want to take a little closer look at your own exposure, whether it's your digital footprint, your credential security, your organization's threat detection posture, all the links are in the description for all our sources. And if you want to take a free self-assessment that we created just for you, scan that QR code on your screen. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. Let us know how you like this content if you want to see more. RepSec Wednesday drops every single week. So I'll see you next Wednesday.